Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome again to the Varsity Chatroom. This is the weekly show where we discuss student matters, and today I'm in the company of Simon Amunime. He is the president of the Students Union of Namibia. So today we'll be discussing, amongst other things, the return of students and learners respectively to schools, as well as some other topics which you'll have to wait to find out. But before we get into the discussion, we're just going to have a short icebreaker where I'm going to ask Simon a few questions that he's going to answer in his personal opinion, in his capacity as Simon Amunime. So the first question is, if you could live in a cartoon world, what cartoon world would you want to live in and why?
Cartoon world. I'm not so into cartoons.
Okay, but I'm sure you know a few.
The last time I used to do cartoons were the Pokemons. Yeah, so if it's to live in the cartoon world, I'll choose the Pokemons.
Okay, I would definitely want to live in Bikini Bottom and taste the Krabby Patty. But to each his own. The second question is, if everybody was literally incapable of lying, how do you think that would shape the world if nobody could lie?
Ooh, it could have been a wonderful world.
I
think it will be more biblical and people will be obedient. So it really be a wonderful world. I wish that could happen some days.
Definitely, but on that note, we're now going to start tackling the real world. So on next week, Monday, that being the 3rd of August, that is going to be the final phase of the return to schools, specifically for primary school learners with grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 returning to school, as well as grade 10s. So what does the Student Union of Namibia make of this return to school so far? How has the return to school been for those grades that have already returned? And what are the expectations, or what is your stance as a student body on the return of school, of learners to schools?
Okay, no, thank you very much, Esther. The return to school is very challenging, given that the grades that have already resumed classes have been divided into smaller groups, and they happen not to be going to school every day. They perhaps go to school maybe some 2 days per week, because maybe like grade 3 or say smaller, they are put into different groups, maybe A, B, and C, to observe social distancing at school, in classes, and so forth. And the learning have also been affected because you just go 2 days per week to school. The time is not sufficient. The attention, as well as for the smaller kids, because their curriculum and syllabus is different. You need as a teacher to touch them, to teach them to sing, to spell ABC. So it's become a challenge where have to put on masks and so forth. So it's not so really effective. And our assessment, when we've been visiting school, we've mainly seen it's just a thing of people going to school. But there's no proper learning really taking place. The psychological support is not there, even from the teacher side and so forth. But getting back to the question in terms of the returning of the other grades is planned for on the 3rd of August. It becomes a very serious challenge again, knowing that already those that are at school are divided into smaller groups and they don't go every day. So now, with the whole school returning, how are we going to manage that? Are we going to get extra halls or classroom from somewhere, or extra teachers? So it becomes a challenge. That's why from our organization as a union, we are saying, let's prioritize what you call the transitional grades. So we are saying the grade 7 must return to school. Then we speak about the grade 9, because they're also writing national exam, external, then 11 and 12, because they're exiting grades. We prioritize those because of course we need students that must go to university next year. We need students that must go to high school. Then our young bundle of joys can stay at home. We don't have to risk them that much. So that is our position. And there have been various meetings. Even yesterday I attended one with the stakeholders, such as the Teachers Union of Namibia. They're having the same call that given the recent rising community transmission, it becomes very difficult because some schools have closed to disinfect their premises again, because people from the community surrounding, especially in Windhoek, informal settings such as Korea Hub, Katura, and Chomis as well, they have these things. So kids have to be sent home. So even next week, they are not coming to school because of those measures. So I think the ministry must just take the right choice and prioritize those that are transiting, and we keep the younger ones at home.
Okay, but in terms of progress in education, if we keep the others home, how do you think we can bridge that gap? Because now there are some learners that are attending school and then there are some that are at home. So how do we make sure that those that are at home, keeping safe, are still educated?
Yes. Earlier in the year, they had a program where they give you assignments and booklets. And I think this one of the organizations.
Do you think that was effective?
Yes, it was very effective. I think also as citizens of the country, we ought to begin to take responsibility as parents, as community members, because we have to understand that education is a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
So usually we blame the teachers, but it's also time that we as parents in this crisis also make a contribution in terms of making time. Even when you knock off, you go through certain books, spelling with your child. Learning has to continue. Given the crisis, we can't stop it completely, but it's just the method that has to change.
Yeah.
So we're saying they will not be left out. Let the parents be given, do assignments, they are returned back to the teachers, they assess and so forth. Then only then we are able to get somewhere. By the way, even in South Africa and neighboring countries have closed school for 4 weeks. So I think because their transmission is worse, we understand also their population is, you can't compare, they are over 50 million. So ours, with a smaller population, and checking that now the COVID-19 has spread all over. I think almost all the region except I think Kavango West, but it's everywhere. So I think really we can consider that and manage a smaller number at school. Otherwise it will be chaos. When you visit, in class there are spaces for 1.5 meter, but these kids outside, they are hugging, they are playing tags, they are sharing a bottle of water. Yeah, so when it's now the whole school, it's going to be a crisis. Also teachers are worried of their safety.
Okay, so we've tackled primary school as well as high school, but you're probably wondering why we're talking about that on the Varsity Chatroom. Of course, we need to start from somewhere. So obviously, as Simon has mentioned earlier, these are eventually the people that will be called students, first years come next year. But speaking of universities and institutions of higher learning, for one, the minister is scheduled to visit NAS today to observe that the various requirements are met in order for the return of students back to campus for face-to-face teaching and learning, which is also around the corner. So considering, amongst other factors, the fact that a lecturer from the Namibia University of Science and Technology and another from the University of Namibia tested positive for COVID-19, how does this impact the return of students back to campus?
Yes, we are very worried as students, but yet again it brings us also to say that little kids are at schools, then the varsities ones are at home. And we are the bigger, the matured one and responsible more than the small kids that are already attending basic education. So when this news came out, we were thinking in terms of reconsidering. Because, for example, for the University of Namibia first, they were saying that they will prioritize as well all the final years to return to campus and the practical-oriented courses. Then the others can at least try and utilize the online learning platforms while they are still assessing and see how do they, because then you gradually return group by group. You don't just return everyone. The lecture halls need to be shared and so forth. I think that will be manageable at least for now. Have the final years back and the practical-oriented course like the health-related programs and so forth, then we can see in terms of how the others are able to manage online. But in terms of our position as a union, we are saying it must be optional. Those that want to continue doing online and want to remain home must do so. But those that are brave enough and thinking that whatever it takes or they really need to be on campus can return to campus and resume face-to-face. Now, when you come to NAS have extended their academic calendar to the 3rd of March next year, taking into account that the online learning or e-learning was not so effective and was not so inclusive
Yeah.
There are certain students that were left out. There are 8 villages locked down there. There's no network, they couldn't access. So it was ample time to make sure that everyone catches up. And until they push it extended to next year March, then the academic year for 2021 starts in March. And again, looking at the crisis that someone tested positive, and they are still assessing that there might be a second case again at NAST. So they came out yesterday to say that face-to-face classes will resume on Monday, which is next week on the 3rd of August. But again, is to say that we're also encouraging those that are able and have the means to do online learning. They must utilize those platforms, because it's very difficult for us to crowd the lecture halls and so forth. But we are sure that they are going to disinfect the whole buildings, make sure all the protocols that are supposed to be followed, and it's safe for students to return to campuses. But we hope that students as well, when they return to campuses, that they take the protocols that are there, and the social distance, putting on your mask. And also, I think at university we are matured enough than the little kids at the basic education level.
That's true. And while you're on that point, I think, as you mentioned, they are mature, but of course, sometimes we make not so smart decisions, be it because of the influences around us or for whatever known reasons. So specifically at university level, what advice do you have for students upon the return back to campus to ensure that they keep themselves, safe and keep observing the various protocols? For instance, somebody might now come say, "Oh, Simon, can I borrow your mask? I quickly want to go." These are realities, as insane as it might sound. So do you have any words that you would like to give for students?
Yes, I know that we are very devastated. Some of the students are stressed, they're supposed to be done. Some couldn't go for internship. Some the research are behind. Online was frustrating. Most of them want to return to campus. Yet again, we must take cognizance of the fact that COVID-19 is real and it's spreading now at a very high rate. And the students that are at least conscious, that understand the health implications, the protocols, and so forth, I think we must be at the forefront of making sure that we observe all these protocols that are put in place. Also be exemplary to others, at least that are not at the level of education like ourselves. So really, we must not take it for granted when we are on campus, and it must really be when it's necessary that you have to be in crowds or around each other. If not, after class we are able at least to keep distances and make sure that we don't put our life at risk, and we don't put the life of our loved ones at risk. But there's one thing that I forgot to touch, Esther, is in terms of the private institution. See, private institutions like the International University of Management, Tramford College, Lingua, and also other colleges, and mention all of them. These are institutions that are confronted with financial challenges, because NAST and UNAM get subsidy from the government. UNAM gets around over 900 million every year, NAST get over 500 million, and government have come to assist them, I think, of around 5 million for them to strengthen their IT infrastructure and architecture, that is strengthen the bandwidth, and these platforms are able. But now with these private institutions are finding a challenge where they are struggling really, because students have not been on campus, and students cannot pay when they are not on campus. Meaning they have stopped their installments, they have not been paying. So we have seen institutions cutting even the salaries of their staff members, of their lecturers, at least to be able to survive. They have to pay services and so forth. That's why we have learned that this institution have already begun with face-to-face classes, despite the risk. So we are also just urging at least government to assist in terms, because they also have students that are funded by NASFAF. At least the public institutions are given subsidy, and the students' loan, which is tuition fee, which this institution heavily rely on, at least let them prioritize this institution. They pay the students' tuition fee earlier than maybe paying it in December, so forth. So these institutions are able to survive. Because if they close down, it's again going to be our students, because there's no private or public students. All students are the same, only the institution differ. So, and they also struggle in terms of their IT facilities. They are not so equipped and so forth for them to affect the online learning. So it's very, very difficult. That's why they've called all their students to start classes. So we are just saying, at least let them be assisted in terms of speeding up those payments for the students also to be able to continue receiving their education.
Yes, and while we're on the topic of funding, I think it has become a very pressing issue for especially self-funded students, where some of their parents might have been retrenched during the crisis and therefore they cannot afford tuition fees. Some of them are forced to drop out of their universities, and others also could not cope with the online learning and perhaps, pardon me, couldn't see the progress that they were making, so they opted to rather drop out. So what word of encouragement do you have for these students, or what can be done rather to make sure that such students are not put at a disadvantage when it comes to tertiary education?
Yes, you see, funding is a very serious problem that we have, because not everyone is able to access the funding. That's why from the onset we have always been saying that let the proof of registration be a requirement in terms of getting funding in a country like Namibia that is having a lot of resources. Now we have limited it to say that, no, look, if you don't have, for example, 25 points in 5, or you are not doing a priority area of study, or you are doing a diploma, you don't qualify to get a loan. And these are the people that are coming from impoverished and disadvantaged background. So let us not be selective in terms of education. It doesn't mean when someone is doing an honors and I'm doing a diploma, that person is better than me. Education is the same, and the reason that these programs are accredited and offered at this institution of learning is because they are relevant. So let's fund all these students regardless of the level as well as the profession they are studying. Now, given the current circumstances where parents lost income, people are retrenched, some students used to have smaller businesses, it's a source of income for them to pay their study. Given the lockdown and all the predicament of COVID-19, this whole process has been hindered. So we've pledged with the university at least to be lenient. Let the students still continue attending. You credit them that they owe them this much, then we can see around December, then maybe we can withhold the students' results, then we can negotiate again. Because it doesn't assist us sending them away while they've already started earlier in the year. So we've asked that to happen. And also from the student side, let them not give up. If there's issue, let them visit our office. As a Student Union of Namibia, we can always try with the Office of the Dean of Students of those various institutions to make sure that they don't completely drop out. At least let them be an exception to say, no, we understand times are tough, it's difficult, not only for the institution, for government, but for everyone. So let's be considerate and make sure that no one is left out, and we are able to see. By the way, if my tuition fee was 20,000 and I have not been coming to school, and you want to send me home because of 20,000. Now, can you also say, can you also reduce the tuition fee for this year, because we're not being taught, there was no presentation and so forth. So let us be lenient so we are able to help each other. As I said, it's a shared responsibility.
Okay, and Simon, you also wanted to touch on the issue of the marginalized students. Can you take us through that? What is the current situation?
Okay. No, the marginalized students are a special group that are coming from the disadvantaged communities. We have what we call the San, Ovachimba, and Ovatwe. So these are students that comes from those disadvantaged areas, people who did not have access like the other segment of the population. So the ministry under the Office of the Vice President have a special bursary program that fund these students in terms of making sure that they give them monthly allowances, they fund their tuition fee, they get for them accommodation and so forth. Because with NASFAF it's a different story. They pay your non-tuition fee, which is your refund, maybe December. And these people have no way. Just imagine coming from Tsunkwe, you are not used to a city life, so they even struggle to adapt. in the city setup. That's why that special program was put in place to be able to assist. Now, what has been happening since last year, these students have not received their allowance, they have not been sorted out. So most of them have dropped out, they've been going home. Some of them are stranded here in Windhoek and so forth because of the failure of the marginalized division under the office of the vice president. Now, you see the requirement when it's come to them, even university have special arrangement to say, even if you have 20 points, you are from a marginalized community, we are able to enroll you for a bachelor's program that require 25. Now, when they go to NASWAF will tell you that, no, you don't meet the criteria of 20, we can't fund you. That's why this department assists them to make sure that they are inculcated into the education system. Now, the challenge is that they have no money in terms of transport. They can't pay their accommodation. Ever since they moved in, the agreement was there that government will pay their allowances, nothing. Their toiletries and money for food, there's nothing. So we've been engaging, writing letters to the deputy minister that is responsible for the marginalized community. Nothing has been coming forth. But just recently we've heard that around 25 million was misappropriated that was meant for these students. Just imagine that the needy student, they're disadvantaged, but money was misappropriated. These marginalized students officially are only found in 5 regions. But the said ministry has decided that they'll be giving 10 per region, awarding 10 per region. Now they've been awarding 10 in 14 regions, but in 14 regions you don't find the marginalized groups, meaning officials have been using this budget or this division for them to empower and fund their relatives, their close people, and people that are not from this community. However, we have decided to say that we can't engage the minister anymore. We've engaged directly to call upon the office of the vice president himself, His Excellency Nangolo Mbumba, to come and assist in terms of this crisis, because these people are stranded. The chiefs are calling us from those rural areas to say this is what is happening to our people. We are already suffering, we are not like others, and this is what is happening to our kids. And it seems there's possible feedback, because they are saying in 2 or 3 days time those the matter will be resolved and those allowances will be released. We just hope that it's going to happen soon.
Okay. Do you have any closing remarks or any message to anybody who's watching right now?
Yes. It's just to say in closing that in every crisis there are always opportunities. As students, despite the challenges we are facing, despite the difficulties, we must also see the good side of this crisis. So it doesn't mean that we must just stay home when we're not going to school and sleep, because you even get tired of sleeping. So at least let's utilize it, read books or watch a progressive series that we are learning something. Take time to go for a learner's license or a driver's license. Engage into research, because it's also about personal responsibility. We must move away from the narrative of just going to a lecture hall, you get taught, you do an assignment, you submit. Also, you must be able to know that if I'm alone at home, this time I must do my assignment, this time I must do revision, this time I must do my research. As students, not that you need to be pushed by someone. So there's also something good that we can take out of the whole COVID-19 crisis or pandemic, not only the bad side. But what I would like to say that let's take care. This thing is real. Let's practice the protocols that are put in place. Let's protect ourselves. Let's put our mask on when we're in public places. And yes, let's take care.
Thank you so much, Simon, for spending some time with us and engaging us on those very important topics. So I hope that this show was informative to you, the viewer, and of course join us again next time on Thursday as we discuss more student matters.